Thank you, Chair Peters, Ranking Member Langford, and thank you both for your willingness to serve these important roles. I'm going to move a little bit over to the talking about IT modernization in OPM. And so, Mr. Shriver, I really thank you for being here today. I'd like to talk about GAO's high risk report. It comes out every 2 years and identifies areas in the federal government at high risk for fraud, waste, or mismanagement. The last report made a number of recommendations for addressing these high-risk areas, and OPM, of course, has a large role to play in addressing them. Specifically, in the area of IT modernization and workforce training, one of the report's recommendations for improving the federal government's management of tens of billions of dollars of IT investments was establishing key IT workforce planning processes. So, Mr. Shriver, if confirmed, what are your plans to work with individual federal agencies to ensure that they have these workforce planning processes in place? And how, in your new capacity, will you work to recruit and retain specifically cybersecurity staff?
Thank you very much for your question, Senator. And I think certainly the IT modernization issues that you've raised have been priorities at OPM and will continue to be priorities for us. And if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed as Deputy Director, it's an area that I would be happy to play an active role. I'm currently in my day-to-day role as the Associate Director for Employee Services. I'm not as involved in that. I can say that I think with respect to the GAO high risk list and recommendations overall, our strategy at OPM has been to embed those into our strategic plan. We have a new OPM strategic plan that we released earlier this year, and that plan is informed by the recommendations from GAO, including on IT. We have metrics that we're using to measure progress. We have regular leadership level meetings to talk strategically about implementation of that plan and those recommendations. And so I would continue to play a role, and as Deputy Director would actively engage on the IT issues. With respect to cyber talent, we have major challenges in the federal government, and there are some good practices that have begun. I was happy to work with the Department of Homeland Security on deployment of its cyber talent management system, which has some interesting innovations when it comes to hiring and compensation and the way that cyber talent is deployed across DHS. I think there are a lot of lessons to learn there, and I would welcome the opportunity to work with you and this committee on how we might develop a government-wide cyber talent strategy that puts the rest of the agencies on more of a level playing field with DHS and DoD, who also has its own authority.
Yeah, well, I'd very much like to work on that because we do need to do IT modernization across the whole government, and we have a skills gap issue. And so GAO's most recent high-risk report also identified strategic human capital management as a high-risk area. It's downgrading the federal government's progress rating in this area from its 2019 report. So in doing so, it cited that what was at the time in 2021, the lack of a Senate-confirmed leadership at OPM for 18 of the prior 24 months, it really led to a mission-critical skills gap across the federal workforce. We know this in every area. Thankfully, OPM now is a confirmed director in place, but as deputy, you will still have a key role to play in addressing, again, the skills gap required to do this modernization still persists. So the training, the skills gap, how do you think you can address it? What can we do here to help you address it as you think about your new role?
Thank you for your question, Senator, and thank you for acknowledging that the lack of consistent leadership in the past at OPM has been a major contributing factor in that area. And so under Director Ahuja's leadership, and if I were to be confirmed as deputy, we would be certainly prioritizing and excited about making progress in this area. We've been doing a lot of work on the skills gap at OPM. One of the things that I think is important, Senator, is actually hiring people based on skills instead of proxy for skills. Many agencies historically have been hiring folks maybe because they have a college degree or because they rank themselves as on self-assessment questionnaires. We have been implementing a new skills-based hiring initiative that where we work with agencies to really define what the qualifications are that are needed for the jobs and then how they can assess candidates based on the actual skills that they have. One of the techniques that has been successful in some pilot projects is actually engaging subject matter experts in the hiring process. So the subject matter experts know what to look for on a resume, they know what to listen for in an interview, and they know what to look for in a writing sample. That's critical. I think in addition to looking to hire people based on skills, we certainly need to work on our career development, on our training opportunities, work on upskilling. I know OPM has had some successful upskilling pilots in the past around cybersecurity, around the IRS, and I think that we have an opportunity to build on those efforts and help align workers' existing skills to new jobs and make sure that we provide the training they need to be successful.
Yeah, I particularly like the upskilling. I think that really helps. You have employees that are already there, helps move them around, someplace you're already familiar with. Of course, the proxy for skills, that's really great because people do have a lot of skills they bring to the table, and it's important for us to identify them. Just in the few seconds I have left, I know Senator Sinema was talking about science-based rulemaking, and so Mr. Rivez, in the prior administration, many rulemakings were heavily influenced by politics rather than science or legal principles, and it is crucial that all federal agencies, including the EPA, Department of Interior, Department of Energy, use the best science available in order to protect public health and, of course, the environment. And so I know you spoke a little bit for Senator Sinema's question, but you talk about your analysis and how you're going to do it and how you're going to keep it free of politics. Is there anything else that you'd like to let us know about how you want to work on those things and make sure that we have the best rulemaking for the agency, for the people, and our and the environment as well?
Thank you for the question, Senator. As I mentioned, I think it's just important that in the analysis, all of the consequences be taken into account, and I wrote a book about some of the analytical failings in the analysis done by the prior administration, and actually the courts ended up striking down a number of those rules based on the poor quality of the analysis. So, for example, one mistake was to essentially equate unquantified benefits as non-existent just because the techniques for quantifying them had not been developed, as opposed to trying to figure out in a qualitative way how to take them into account. There were also regulations that essentially ignored the indirect consequences of regulation if they were positive, but took them into account if they were negative. That is putting a thumb against regulation. All of those are erroneous techniques, are not consistent with the methodology and with professional understandings. And if confirmed, I will make sure that the best professional understandings of how to do this work were followed by OIRA.
Thank you. My time's expired.
Thank you, Senator Rosen.